This is Whisper from History, where forgotten voices rise again. If you missed our 32 episode Season 1, Dark History, watch the full playlist on our channel. Time is not always what it seems. Some people wake to a morning they've already lived. Some die, and then rise again. What if yesterday never truly ends? What if the line between life, death, and memory shatters, and you find yourself trapped in a loop? Only you can feel. This is the story of those who lived yesterday twice. Stay till the end, because who knows, maybe you are part of a loop no one has ever broken. I remember the first time someone told me such a story. They spoke quietly, as though they were afraid even the walls might overhear. I died yesterday, they said, and then later, I woke up yesterday, again. That was their loop. That was their madness. It started with a morning like any other. Rain pattered against the window. The alarm clock screamed, and Sarah sat up. The sunlight thinned behind clouds. She blinked. She recognized the ceiling, the pattern of the paint, the single crack in the wall above the doorway. Something was off. She glanced at her phone. 6:32 a.m. Exactly the same as yesterday. She got out of bed, stumbled into the kitchen. But the coffee maker sputtered the same way. The dog barked at the door in that same pattern. She peeled an orange, the juice dripping in exactly the same way, hitting the countertop with the same rhythm. And then she saw the headline in the newspaper, "Local teen found dead, Dwight Matthews." A friend, someone she knew by sight, not deeply, and the headline crushed her. She sat frozen. When the bell rang at school, she walked into class already knowing what would follow. The teacher's footsteps down the hall, the whisper about Dwight, the sudden arrival of paramedics. Sarah knew, and in her mind, she said once more, "I died yesterday." But when the next morning came, something changed, or so she believed. She woke again at 6:32 a.m., but there was no rain. The newspaper's headline was different. Dwight was alive, back in school. The teacher was talking about his project presentation, not tragedy. That sick knot of grief in Sarah's chest loosened a fraction. She walked through the day, watching everyone move unaware. Anyone would have thought it was just another Friday. But for Sarah, it was 2 Fridays, 2 versions of the same day. One ending in grief, the second in relief. How do you live a whole day twice? This story surfaces again and again in paranormal forums. One person calls them reality shifts, another time slips, sometimes do-over days. They describe entire days replaying with slight differences. Sometimes emotional triggers seem to anchor these loops, a traumatic loss, a betrayal, a desperate wish. They aren't fiction writers often. They are people like Sarah. Someone who got up one morning convinced that something had gone wrong. Somebody needing confirmation, but nobody else notices. Everyone else lives today once. Other stories are shorter, sharper, embedded in dreams, or sleep paralysis. A young man wakes from sleep paralysis. He opens his eyes, a dark figure lurks. He tries to will himself awake. He does relief, or so he thinks. He's still lying in bed. It's dark, the same figure. He tries again, blinking, calling out, hoping. Each awakening feels realer until it isn't. This loops, over and over. Minutes pass, maybe hours. His pulse races. Finally, something gives. The light filters. He opens his eyes for real. But in that liminal space between dream and wake, his mind had lived the same dread dozens of times. Sometimes with the same ending, sometimes with small changes. One time he raised his hand. One time he screamed. One time he noticed the window was open. But always, the darkness returned. These loops aren't full days, but for many, they feel more real than waking life. When they recount the loops later, their voice shakes. Some say they died many times in those dreams figuratively. Some say they were certain they would never wake. And yet, eventually they did. There's also the case of those who say they died yesterday, and then woke up to discover they died yesterday, again. Take the account of a man named Terry in one old radio broadcast. He says the first Friday, he came home to the news of Dwight's murder. The shock, the sorrow. He could barely think. That night, sleep came uneasily. Morning came, but it was still Friday. Dwight alive. Everything else repeated precisely. Hallway voices, lockers, the smell of chalk, the sound of a car horn. Except this time there was no tragedy. Terry had the memory, the burden, of both Fridays, of death and non-death. The tension of grief, then the tension of disbelief. He never understood what had shifted. How one version had ended in death, and the next had carried on. But those days became permanent in his memory. Twin Fridays, These stories share patterns, repetition of time, of events, of emotional moments. Memory retention. One person remembers both versions, often painfully so. Everybody else seems stuck in only one version. Minimal divergence. The second version often has one or two differences. Maybe someone alive who was dead before. Maybe the weather. Perhaps a choice unmade. Trigger moments. Something traumatic, emotional, or deeply felt often seems to precipitate the loop. The question becomes, are these time loops real, or are they illusions of mind, memory slips, emotional breakdowns? Science offers some clues. Sleep paralysis is well documented. It's the state between sleep and wake, when your mind partially wakes but your body remains frozen. Many report vivid visions, terrifying presences, the sense of being unable to move. Some even report multiple awakenings within this state, false awakenings. These false awakenings can loop. As the brain transitions between REM sleep and waking, people may believe they have woken up only to wake again, trapped between realms. The sensory details can be brutal. The pressure on the chest, the familiar room, the longing for escape. Could true day-long loops, like Sarah's Double Friday, be expanded versions of false awakening loops? A dream stretched over waking life, memory misplacement, emotional trauma. Another angle. Human memory is fallible. We reconstruct, we misplace time. Events blend. We misremember exactly how something unfolded. A headline could be misread, repeated in memory. A conversation might be recalled twice, as though it happened again. Sometimes grief or shock can distort perception of time. Hours stretch, moments fragment. People waiting for something for news, sometimes live time more painfully, as though each moment is double. But then the testimonies resist neat rationalization. Because in many cases, the people recounting these loops hold to them with certainty. They remember the second Friday just as clearly as the first. What they saw, heard, felt, and often their emotional world shifted because of the difference. Sometimes for relief. Sometimes the change only deepened the burden. There are also cultural and spiritual interpretations. Some believe that such loops are warnings. Others think they are glimpses beyond ordinary reality. Perhaps echoes of parallel timelines. Perhaps suggestions that for some people, time isn't linear, but layered. If there are many worlds, many possible variations, then perhaps Sarah walked from one version into another without realizing. Or perhaps time itself fractured around her grief. Whatever the truth, these stories share a final shape. The loop ends. Sometimes abruptly. The next morning feels regular. The headline is new. The day doesn't repeat. The dark figure lifts. The paralysis releases. Then comes aftermath. The disorientation. Questioning. Was it a dream? A hallucination? A grief-addled distortion? Or something more inexplicable? Sarah, in her version, returned to everyday life. Walked through school lunches. Smiled at friends. but she never forgot the pain of the first Friday. The relief of the second. Both lived. She became more attuned to small differences, the orientation of a chair, the tone of a friend's greeting. She started to believe that maybe we are always standing at the point where time could branch. In the end, what does "I died yesterday" mean? Not always literal, not always physical death. Sometimes it's emotional, a loss that felt like death, a part of self gone. Sometimes it's that moment when something so terrible happens that it fractures your timeline in memory, and you live again. Because you must. These stories are rare, and maybe that's why they endure. They touch something universal: grief. Hope, the need to believe that tragedy can be undone, or at least glimpsed again with change. They teach us that time is fragile, that our minds hunger for closure, for do-overs, that the boundary between dying and waking, between loss and continuation, is more permeable than we wish. And perhaps that is all we can hold on to: the memory of yesterday, and the fragile, trembling hope that it can be remade. The loop ends. Eventually, morning comes. Headlines change. The darkness lifts. But for those who have lived the same day twice, nothing ever feels ordinary again. Time has shown them its hidden fractures and left them with a fragile hope that even the most painful yesterday can be seen again, and maybe lived again. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and watch our series Unsolved Paranormal Events for more chilling mysteries.